chair. Good. So nice and comfortable in your chair. The basic sitting position when you're upright is with your feet below your knees. We will go into the reclining position in a few moments, but just our normal start, rubbing your hands together, and then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Up your chest. Belly. Your legs. Now we sit back, and with your legs out, there's a natural backward drop with your shoulders and your back slightly angled. You still want to feel, even though the body is actually curved, but there's still this sort of sense of a line. You're not just kind of like idly with one leg out. So you can still feel some of the sort of alignments in your body. And remember that any of the stuff that we say about posture, straight lines here and there, they don't really exist, those straight lines. So my personal sort of image of them is that they're like grid lines that you get on a map. And somebody heard me say this before, but if you look at a map, you see these grids. If you take the map out into a field, you won't see the grid lines on the field because they're just a way of orientating yourself. So when we talk about, for instance, the line from shoulder to hip to ankle, it's a way of orientating ourselves. So as I say, we're not just like this or like this. There's a pattern there, if you like, an idea there. And there's a number of things like that in Tai Chi, or mental constructs almost, that we use. But they shouldn't be seen as an encouragement to force yourself into a position that is uncomfortable in any way or straining your body. So this one, just feeling your weight dropping back, and in particular aware of those points of contact with the chair, which, roughly speaking, somewhere in the upper part of your back. Remember hips, lower back, buttocks, that kind of area. And you want them to feel as though they're just sinking into the chair. And that creates an effect almost like taking the plug out of a bath, that the water will gradually begin to move. So it's almost like if you could take the plug out, your weight would drain away. Which of course it won't, but what it does mean then is that you're no longer resisting that movement. The natural pull down is the pull of gravity. And if we can find a way to be aware of that and not strain against it, then there's less strain overall in the body. And then bring your feet parallel. So, and the same thing here. Obviously the position has changed, but again we have these lines. And think of your body as being a bit like a drain pipe on the side of a house, that if you're straight, then there's more likelihood that the draining away effect will take place. And sometimes there's a physical effect. I mean, for instance, if you lift your shoulders up towards your ears, either one shoulder or both shoulders, and then let them drop down, you'll feel a distinct falling. But even with the shoulders down, there's still a sense of movement to the body. The same thing in your hips and lower back. And if we were standing, I would say to people, don't try and bend your knees too much, especially to start off with. The thing is soften the resistance in our hips and our knees to the pull of gravity, so that we feel that movement. And what happens is, as we do that, one of the important things to notice is that you haven't just collapsed in a kind of puddle on the ground. So that downward movement is neutralized, matched by what is effectively an upward movement, which is the resilience of your body. It's like when you sit on a chair, effectively the chair is pushing back up. And so what we discover is that there's this quality of inner strength. We don't actually need that stiffness, we don't actually need that tightness, we can afford to let it go. And in doing so, we discover this strength within the body. And a useful way of thinking that in the first instance is in the seated position, you think about your spine and the surrounding area, almost like a column holding you up. So that inner strength has its source in a way in the deeper and lower parts of the body, and is a response to the pull of gravity. So even as we sit still in this way, there's movement through the body. Broadly speaking, a downward movement with the pull of gravity, an upward movement with that, what I've described as resilience. And we may discover other movements as you lose some of the tightness, say in your belly, your chest. It's when it's like your breathing become a bit more noticeable. But underlying that is this cycle of movement down and up as a constant. So then just turning your head. And that cycle within the body is, I find, one of the key momentum, one of the key energies that we work with in Tai Chi. We want to align ourselves with the pull of gravity. And when we move, we don't want to lose that alignment. But the fact that there's an upward movement offers a bit of energy for the movement. And then your shoulders. There are lots of currents of movement, patterns of energy, however you think of it, within the body. And one of the sort of progressions in Tai Chi is to become more aware of those and to begin to work with them, to get them to harmonize. And it's not a bad way of understanding this concept of the Qi, if you like to think of it like that, going forwards. And it requires both body and mind and the movement, the energy itself, to be part of the process. Then your hands down by your sides. So one of the goals in Tai Chi, one of those sort of aims, is to develop this harmonious quality in what's referred to as the Qi. And there's a lot of different interpretations of that. It's very contextual, exactly what it means. But in this context, in terms of Tai Chi, what you want to be thinking about is that we can bringing together those three elements of body, mind, and energy, body, mind, and movement, and begin to work consciously with them. And for me, that's a useful way of thinking of the term qi in terms of Tai Chi, and it's a kind of group noun, if you like. And then winding around. So if we encounter resistance in the body, you know, a bit tight in your back or your shoulders or something like that, beginning to work with that, to release that, will involve all those three elements to a greater or lesser degree. You might want to think about, to be aware of your posture, for instance. Can you change that, or how you're moving? You might want to use an image to encourage this flowing quality. It might be a particular exercise that actually helps to release it. Go back the other way. It might be a disruption in the flow of the movement that first makes you aware of that blockage. So these three elements interact very much with each other. Yes. And then tilting forwards and push back. This is where Tai Chi really overlaps with Chinese medicine, things like acupuncture. And they say in acupuncture and Chinese medicine that the energy follows the thought and the body follows the energy. So mind, body, energy. To my mind, it's not quite so linear as that. As I said, I think they overlap and interact with each other in various ways. In terms slightly, that means that if you like to think with the mind training element, the meditational element in Tai Chi is on a par of importance with the actual physical exercise. And this idea of what we call intent in Tai Chi, an intention, a purpose, if you like, can have a profound effect on the body. So we train that quality of intent. And then on the side. And then swing around. Go back the other way. Come back to the middle and pull one knee up and push out. The idea of intent can sound a bit distant sometimes, but in fact we do it all the time. Arguably, if you decide after the class that you want a cup of tea, there'll be an intent to have a cup of tea, and you've done it so often, you probably won't need to think too much about it. You know where the tea is, you know where the kettle is, and so on and so forth. So one of the things we want to generate, for instance, here is the intent of the foot. And what we say in Tai Chi is that we plant the foot. So it's a very deliberate act. It's not a random act. And it's about, in a way, getting the foot to go into the ground. So put your foot down and see if you can just very gently push in and then pull back. Like if you were planting a bulb, you would position it and then just push it down into the ground. And then on the other side. Over a period of time, these little things make quite a difference. They build up and just become a part of how we move. Obviously, that's an ongoing, in a way, quite long-term process. And move it back. Let your hands drop down. Fisherman cast a net. So sometimes the intent is there in the name. There's the idea of throwing the net out, throwing the sheet over the bed, whatever image works best for you is this one. Sometimes it can be a more kind of abstract feeling. Sometimes it can come from a memory. We tend to find that we remember particular exercises more than others. So it's a recalling, shall we say. Sometimes changing the intent, changing the image, as your understanding of the movement changes, that too can provoke a change. Try and just notice small changes within your body. So for instance, when you go forwards, there'll be a tendency for your back to lengthen. So you can get a sense of the spaces between your vertebrae just extending out, contracting back. And when you've done that a little bit, see if you can notice that sort of effect elsewhere in your body. And then coming over. For this one, I imagine having a ball in front of me, and when I'm forwards, my arms are draped over the ball. I push my feet down, and as I come back, my hands just slide over the ball, or else roll the ball in. And I use that image to stop me trying to sort of strain to lift my arms. So although my hands come up, I'm not actively lifting my arms up. I'm pulling on my arms. And then pigeon spreads its wings. Elbows, pull your fingers away from each other. You get this slightly almost barrel-chested quality in chest and ribs. And then this time when you come back, pressing forwards. So the movements themselves encourage this training of our minds. And in return, the trained mind produces a stronger quality of intent. And it tends to be in those very small changes, very small movements that I just drew your attention to, that we find the mind has the greatest effect. They're like the building blocks, the bricks of the structure and movement of our body. And if we can initiate a change there, then we're a long way towards changing the overall movement. And then hands fisted. And your hands out. Effect on the mind is also important because as we let our attention sink deeper and deeper into the body, that quieter feeling, that more spacious feeling in our mind becomes really quite strong. So again, these different elements reinforcing and stimulating each other. Bringing your hands in and pushing up. Imagine somebody's pressing down gently on your head. You let them push you down, and then you use your feet and your hip. Let your head get pushed up your back length, and then we get that wave-like movement up through the body, moving the arms forwards. And then again, going down. So again, we get that very subtle lengthening, contracting the spine. And remember, it shouldn't be a strain. If you think about it, there's what, 30 odd vertebrae in the spine. You imagine sort of the space between each vertebra expanding just a little. It accumulates through the whole of the length of the spine. And again, that's a process that we can begin to become aware of happening one way or another through the whole of the body. It's like when you see a cat stretch out from front to back, the whole of its body, and there's a very similar kind of quality to it. And then let your hands come down to your sides. And knees forwards. Heart in the clouds. So the image here is more of a feeling. It's not like a bird flying or something like that, but rather always makes me think of that moment when on a grey day the sun comes out from behind the clouds and has that lovely sort of opening, expansive quality to it. One more time. And then hands down to your sides. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Again, extending, feeling that movement within your body, just like you felt the movement of the pull of gravity downwards and the resistance, the resilience of the body upwards. Now, feeling it as an expansion from your hip to your shoulder, maybe even from your hip to your foot. In general, we'll be more aware of those internal movements. The movement of our arms is quieter. So we may feel as though we want to just almost sacrifice a little bit of movement in our arms to get that feeling. Do one more. and then change it. Pushing out. Lengthening through your back as you push up. Broaden it across your back as you push out. Now, as you push out this time, turn very gently and very carefully in your hips and your waist. Don't twist your back up, so you keep that broadening quality as you turn. Pushing in four directions. Moving from one to the other like this can help to make us aware of those subtle changes between one movement and another. Let's do one more round of this. By focusing our attention in this way, we eventually get to a point where the intention with regard to those smaller movements is what I would describe as subconscious. It's not unconscious, but neither is it down to directly thinking about it. It's just something that happens that we're slightly aware of. And then forward. It's a bit like if you're walking somewhere and it's a route that you've taken many times, you know when to turn the corners, you know which direction you're going in. You may even pick up details like you know where that bit of uneven pavement is or something like that. So you don't have to think about these things, but you are aware of them. And in the same way, you know, changes in the body, the length and the spine are there for you to be aware of. But focusing on them is a useful thing to develop that intuition. And then move your hands into a fist, grasping the tiger's ears. Sides. And then changing. One more time. And just rest for a moment. So again, we come back to this basic posture with the intent to line ourselves up with the pull of gravity and so on, to let our center of gravity sink. That intent partially fueled by the memory of having done this before. So it's important to realize that however esoteric these ideas sound, they're actually very natural to us as human beings. When you walk that little journey to the shops or whatever, where you just know when to turn left or right or to cross the road, you may pass a billboard that has a picture on it, and you may well respond to that without even realize that it might be a picture of something nice to eat or something like that. And Pavlov discovered this with his dogs. He rings a bell and they start salivating because they think it's dinner time. Over and over again, we find these things within our just everyday life. So what we do in Tai Chi is just to be physically, we take the natural structures, the natural patterns of movement within the body and work with them. So it's true, if you like, kind of the mind, if you want to think of it like that as well. We're not growing extra legs, or we're not developing kind of strange superpowers or anything like that. We're just taking what we do anyway and just working with it. If you like, taking ownership of it in a sense. So now just rocking your weight forwards and backwards and add into that this little turning movement. And then bring your hands and arms into the movement, hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. You move forwards and you turn so your shoulder pushes your elbow pushes your wrist pushes your fingers, and pulls and get the push on the other side. Your hand goes up and out just a little. One more on each side. Good. Now rubbing your hands together. Once again. And tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. The side. After your chest. Belly. Your legs. Good. And then stand. So our ability to stand in line with the pull of gravity in equilibrium is aided by our intent to stand like that, and that in its turn is aided by the memory of how it felt and some of the qualities of it when we're in the chair. It's not exactly the same. Obviously, physically, it's significantly different because there's no chair there. But you know, the feeling that I talked about, being aware of the feeling of the pull of gravity through your body, it is still working through your body. And again, as always, you know, feel free to use the chair to help you. Remember that what we want to do is to let our hips sink back. There'll be a little curve in the knees, and a key area to be aware of is here. Again, hips and lower back. And if I can just perch on the back of the chair, you see my hips are hanging over, my knees aren't bending anymore, the chair is supporting me, but there's still that downward pull. And effectively what I want to do is to try and get that same feeling without the chair being there. That's why it becomes very strong on the legs. So there's a very much a physical element to this, conditioning, developing the body. So I'm not suggesting for a moment this is all in the mind or anything like that, but that it's rather, as I say, the coming together, the blending, the harmonizing of these three things. Standing with your feet parallel, let your hips drop down a little bit, and then pushing up. And pressing down. Gradually getting the feeling of your center of gravity sinking a bit more, not every time, but every now and then the center just dropping, pushing up from that. And then just changing. Remembering the effect on your upper body when we were seated, this movement, and the others. And hands cross. Parting the clouds. One more time. Now, 1 foot forwards. Transferring your weight. Remember what I was saying about that idea of planting? So when you're on your back foot, before you move your weight forward, see if you can get that slight feel of just very gently pushing your foot down. Really getting that contact with gravity. And the same thing when you go back across. So that just becomes part of how you move. And this is very significant just for the physical act of rooting down or getting. When you go back this time, just draw your toes up, lower them down, go forwards, raise your heel. And stepping in. Again, step and plant the foot. And on the other side. And then raising your toes and your heel. and stepping in. Shake out. Have your first foot forwards and standing version of fisherman cast net. Way back, change over, same thing on the other side. One more time.
Yeah. Come on in.
Bring your feet parallel. Go back to your chairs. This idea of intent and the integration of mind and body is a very powerful one. I would never suggest that everything is all in the mind. I think that is totally wrong. I would emphasize it's the whole nature of it, body, mind, energy. But our mind, our intent is very important. And I realized that a few years ago when some of my students started asking me about a form that I learned many years ago with a fan. There's all these different forms in Tai Chi. They wanted to learn it. So I thought, well, I'd better revise it and try and remember it. Unfortunately, I had a video. So I was practicing it quite a lot one summer. And there's one particular move in it where you have the fan in one hand and you're standing like this. You go over and you end up and you get to here and you raise the leg. And then you come back slowly. Oops, I did it wrong there because I'm talking. And I spent quite a lot of that summer rolling around on the grass because I kept falling over. And one day I went up there and I focused my attention completely on my foot. I just didn't bother about what my arms were doing or anything else. And it was fine. I found that I could do it. And I repeated that process with various other movements, really making sure that if I'm going to do a movement that's quite tricky, maybe it's one leg's up and you're doing things and so on and so forth, that the first thing I do is really make a particular point. Have I planted the foot down? Can I feel the contact with the ground? And it always makes a difference. So it can be a very powerful idea when we can bring our attention and our mind, the trained mind, into the movement. It's not a panacea. It's not some kind of miracle thing that mind over matter. And it's not just about what you think, but it's a really important tool and something that Tai Chi begins to give us access to. The starting point is always that settling in, that quietening. You can't use your mind, you can't use your body properly, you can't use your energy properly if you're all over the place. So that quieter, still, calm feeling is is right at the heart of what we do. And so in the first Tiger Return to Mountain, that's what we come back to. So if there's one thing to take away from the session for you, it's that sense that there was a quietness, there's a still place which you can come back to. So embrace Tiger, return to mountain. One more time. And rest. Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. That was a nice session for me. Anyway, I hope it was for you. I never know, do I? As always, if you have any questions, do please ask.